There was a boot print in the flour I had spread across my own kitchen floor the night before, and it wasn't pointed at the door, it was pointed down the hall, toward the room where I slept. I'm Marshall, by the way. 36. I run a forklift on the overnight dock at a freight terminal off Alexis Road up in Toledo, load out till the sun comes up, and I'd been renting the bottom half of a divided house on the east side for about 8 months when I started leaving flour on my own floor like some kind of crazy person. So let me back up, because I know how that sounds. The landlord was a guy named Ed, mid-60s. Owned a handful of these places, lived 2 streets over. Friendly. Fixed things fast. First month, honestly, I thought I'd gotten lucky, which is the exact thing everybody says right before the part where they didn't. The first thing that turned was so small I argued myself out of it. I came home off a double and the thermostat was set back 4 degrees, and I'm the only one with a key, or I thought I was, so I figured I'd bumped it. Then it was my recliner, angled a little different, facing the TV instead of the window. Then a beer gone from a 6-pack I could have sworn was full. Little stuff. The stuff you blame on yourself because the other answer is worse. After a while I started keeping a kind of tally in my head. Not on paper. Just noting. The dish towel off the oven handle, folded in neat thirds when I'm a throw-it-and-go guy. My mail squared into a tidy stack twice in 1 week. The medicine cabinet left open a crack, my razor and my 1 bottle of prescription stuff nudged around like somebody had read the label and set it back. None of it gone. All of it touched. And every time I'd run the same argument, that I was tired, that I'd done it myself and forgot, and every time the argument came out a little thinner, the way a lie you tell yourself wears down with use. What I couldn't blame on myself was Ed knowing things. He caught me at the mailbox one Saturday and said, real casual, glad you finally got that smoke detector to quit chirping, and the thing is, I'd never told him about the smoke detector. I'd fixed it myself, at 11 at night, standing on a kitchen chair in my boxers. There is no version of the street where he sees that through a window. He saw it because he'd been standing in my kitchen, looking up at my ceiling, some hour I wasn't home. I asked him, polite as I could, to give me a heads up before he came by. And Ed smiled at me, patient, like I was a kid who hadn't read the fine print, and he said the lease gave him the right to inspect the property, and he liked to keep on top of maintenance, and wasn't that what I wanted in a landlord? And I stood there in my own driveway and couldn't think of a single thing to say, because he wasn't wrong. It was in the lease. I'd signed it. And it got worse right after that, because once he'd said it out loud, once he knew that I knew, he quit being careful about it. He mentioned the new tires I'd just put on my truck, which lived in the garage with the door pulled down. He asked, real friendly, how the lasagna was, a pan my sister had dropped off and I'd stuck in the fridge and told exactly nobody about. Every couple of days it was one more little thing, set light into a conversation like a chip of gravel, and I finally understood the man wasn't slipping up. He was telling me. He wanted me to know he'd stood in my kitchen and my garage and in front of my open refrigerator, and he wanted to watch my face do the arithmetic while he did it. So I did the only thing I could think of that would tell me for sure. Night before another double, I took a bag of flour out of the cabinet, the same Kroger flour that had been in there since I signed the lease and never once got baked into anything, and I laid a thin line of it across the kitchen doorway, corner to corner, so light you'd never see it if you weren't looking down. I felt like an idiot doing it. I remember thinking, if Danny on the dock could see me right now. And then I drove off and ran freight all day and tried not to think about my own kitchen. I got home a little after 9. Flipped the light. And the line was broken. There was one clear boot print in the flour. Heel and tread. A work boot, bigger than mine. And it was not coming toward me, toward the door. The toe was pointed away, down the hall. So I followed it. There was a scuff, then a fainter print on the hallway runner, then nothing, then the bedroom, and I stood in my own bedroom doorway and looked at my bed, and there was a dent in the comforter, down low on the right side. A white soft dent the exact shape of a man sitting. And on the nightstand, my mother's ring, the one thing in that apartment worth anything to me, the one thing I keep on a little dish since she passed, was turned. Not gone. Turned. Set back down facing a different way, like somebody had picked it up to look at it in the light and put it down not quite how they found it. He hadn't taken a thing. That was the part that put ice in me. A burglar takes the ring. Ed picked up my dead mother's ring, sat down on the side of my bed I don't sleep on, and then got up and left it all exactly close enough to write that a normal person wouldn't have known, and drove home 2 streets over to his dinner. I laid the flower again the next week, because I needed to not be crazy, and it happened again, a different day, a print facing the same wrong direction. Then I went and knocked on Ed's door and I told him flat what I'd found, and he didn't even blink. He said a landlord's got a duty to check on his investment. He said if I didn't like how he ran his own houses I could take him to court over it, and we both knew I couldn't spare a lawyer or a month I wasn't working, and he knew I knew, because he was already half smiling when he said it. I filed a report anyway. The officer was kind and told me what Ed already had, that with an inspection clause in the lease it was a civil matter, that I'd have to take him to court to fight the notice, and that would take longer than my lease had left. So here's where I landed, and it's not the part with the sirens, because there isn't one. I didn't move. I couldn't break the lease and eat first, last, and deposit somewhere new, and I think Ed knew that when he shook my hand the first day, the same way he knew everything else. I still live there. Every night before I lie down I push the dresser across the bedroom door and I put the chair under the front knob. And every single morning before work, before coffee, before anything, I crouch down and lay that thin white line of flour across the kitchen, corner to corner, the way another man ties his shoes. Then I drive to the dock. And every night when I come home I read the floor before I read anything else in that house, before I turn on a lamp, before I set down my keys, because that white line is the only thing in the world that will tell me the one thing I have to know before I can close my eyes. Whether the print is back, whether it's pointed at the door, or whether, some hour I was gone, it turned again and went back down the hall.
I'd worked nights at the hospital for 2 years before I understood that my landlord had my shift schedule memorized better than the people who actually made it. I'll call myself Yvonne. What matters is that I'm an ER nurse. I was renting a little 2-bedroom off Central here in Wichita, and my whole life ran backwards from everybody else's, gone all night, dead asleep with blackout curtains half the day. That schedule is the whole story, so hold on to it. When you work nights and live alone, your house sits empty on a timetable, and anybody who bothers to learn the timetable owns a set of hours nobody's ever going to see. It started the way these always seem to, with small things I explained away. I'd come home at 7 in the morning, wrung out, and the blackout curtain in the front room would be pushed a few inches off the glass, a blade of gray daylight laid across the floor where I keep it sealed shut so I can sleep through noon. Once, the TV was on a channel I've genuinely never watched in my life, some fishing show muted. And a smell, faint, but there, menthol cigarettes, in a house where nobody smokes. Honestly, I told myself I was exhausted and misremembering, because when you haven't slept right in 2 years you'll believe almost anything about your own mind before you'll believe the other thing. So I started paying attention, really paying attention. The way you learn to read a patient's chart for the one number that's off. The toilet seat, up, in a house with exactly one woman in it, and no visitors. A water glass in the sink, rinsed but not washed, that I know I didn't leave. The bath mat kicked crooked in a bathroom I keep square out of habit. A kitchen drawer left open 2 inches, the one I always shove shut with a hip on my way past. And then, one morning, one single cigarette but floating in the toilet, menthol, and I looked down at it at 7 a.m. still in my scrubs and felt something in me go very cold and very quiet, because you can talk yourself out of a curtain and a channel. You cannot misremember a cigarette in a house where nobody on this earth smokes. I'd been telling myself a story about being tired. The butt in the toilet was not a story. The landlord was an older man. I'll call him Roy, handy, always happy to come fix a faucet, the kind of helpful that you're grateful for right up until you're not. And once, standing in my driveway, he asked how the new couch was holding up in the front room. I hadn't told him about a couch. It had come the week before, on a Tuesday, and a Tuesday was a night I worked. I mean, I made every excuse there is. Maybe he saw the delivery. Maybe he came by in daylight. You do a lot of maybe when the real answer means a man has been inside your home while you had your hands in somebody's chest across town. The thing that took the maybes away wasn't a camera, and it wasn't a lock. It was Bud, the retired guy across the street, who waters his lawn at dawn and misses nothing. I was hauling in groceries one morning after a shift and Bud ambled over, friendly, and said something like, "Your landlord sure keeps up with this place. His truck's over here too. 3 nights a week. I figured you two had some arrangement." And I said, "Nights?" And Bud said, "Oh yeah, late. After you're gone to the hospital. I just figured he was getting his repairs done while you were out of his hair." I asked Bud, trying to keep my voice level, which nights. And he squinted and counted it off on his fingers. "Tuesdays for sure," he said, "and Thursdays, and every couple weekends." And I stood there with a bag of Dylan's groceries cutting a red line into my hand, because Tuesdays and Thursdays and every other weekend were my nights. That was my rotation. That had been my rotation for 2 years, and a retired man watering his lawn at dawn had it memorized cold, not because I'd told him, but because he'd watched a truck learn it before I ever noticed. And he said it kind. Bud had no idea he'd just handed me the floor dropping out from under my feet. Roy wasn't coming in daylight to fix faucets. He was coming on the nights I worked. He had learned which nights those were. And I did the thing you learn to do on the floor, which is that you don't trust a feeling, you go find the number that proves it. I didn't set a trap. I didn't sit up in the dark with a bat, and I've thought a lot about why, and the truth is I didn't want to be inside that house waiting for him, not even to catch him. What I wanted was proof I could hold in the daylight. So I asked Bud a favor, casual as I could make it. I said, "Next few times you see the truck, would you jot the night down for me? We're trying to settle something about hours." Sweet old man thought he was helping me sort out a repair bill. Over about 3 weeks, he handed me a torn-off strip of a seed catalog with 3 dates on it in pencil. And then I did the part that put the cold all the way through me. I pulled my own badge records from the hospital, the swipes, the ones that clock you onto the unit down to the minute, and I laid Bud's 3 dates next to them at my kitchen table. Every single one of those nights, I had badged into the ER before 11 and not badged out until morning. 2 lists in 2 different hands, kept by 2 people who had never once spoken to each other, and they ran straight down the page together. A retired man with a garden hose and a time clock at a hospital 40 minutes away, both of them swearing to the same thing. That on the exact nights my own name said I was across town with my hands inside a stranger's chest. Roy's truck was in my driveway. And Roy had a key. And here is the part that I think is the real horror of it. I had it in 2 columns on my own kitchen table, and it still didn't matter. I took it to the police and they were gentle and told me that in this state a landlord can enter with reasonable notice, and Roy swore up and down he'd left me a voicemail before every visit, which of course I never got, and that made it a he said thing. A civil thing, a nothing. 2 lists in 2 hands, and the law looked at them and shrugged. He was never charged with anything. He kept the key. He kept the right. I finished out the months I had left flinching every time headlights swung across my bedroom ceiling. And then I left that house, and that sentence is the smallest part of this. Because what he actually took wasn't in the house. I've rented 3 places since, in 2 cities, and I have never once, not one single time, handed a landlord a key without paying a locksmith to change the whole thing over that same afternoon, before I've unpacked a single box. I still lie awake on the nights I work, 3 years on, listening past the hospital and the traffic for tires slowing on a wet street outside a window that isn't even that window anymore. That's what he took from me. Not a thing off a shelf. He took sleep on the nights I work, for the rest of my life, and the law never once called it taking anything at all.
The first time my landlord let himself into my apartment while I was home, he knocked on the inside of my bathroom door to tell me he was there. I was in the shower. I heard 3 soft knocks on the bathroom door, from the hall side, inside my locked apartment, and a voice said, "It's just me, Vaughn, don't mind me." Vaughn. That's me, 41. I do finish carpentry up here in Erie, Pennsylvania, trim cabinets and stairs, which means I have spent my whole career thinking about how a house fits together and how you close it up tight. And that made what happened worse, not better, because I knew exactly how impossible it should have been for him to be on the other side of that door. His name was Cal, owned the converted house I had the top floor of, lived on the ground floor himself, retired, big handshake, the kind of guy who tells you 3 times he treats his tenants like family. And I honestly liked him at first. He'd knock on my actual front door with a 6-pack of Yingling and want to talk about the Steelers for 20 minutes, and I let him, because he was lonely and it was easy and it cost me nothing. It cost me plenty. Every one of those 20-minute visits, I understand now, he was standing in my doorway learning the inside of my place. And he was good at it, better than I gave him credit for. He'd ask to use my bathroom while we talked and be gone a beat too long coming back. He'd nod at my work, "Nice cabinets, those your build," and I'd say yeah and feel proud instead of watched. One evening he mentioned the tool wall I'd put up in the spare room, said it looked sharp, real professional, and the thing is I had never shown him that spare room. I'd never once walked him past my own front hall. I filed it away wrong at the time, filed it under him being a nosy old man craning through a doorway, instead of what it actually was, which was a receipt for a night I hadn't been home. The bathroom thing, that first time, he played off as an emergency, said he smelled gas, had to check the line, sorry. But it kept happening, and the emergencies kept getting thinner. I'd come home off a job, lake effect coming down sideways, and my chair would be moved, or a window I'd shimmed tight against the drafts would be cracked open an inch, or my tools would be lined up a little too neat on the bench, and Cal would let slip something he had no way of knowing unless he'd been standing in the middle of my apartment. I told him, plain, you knock on the front and you wait, that's it, that's the deal. And he got this look, her turning to something harder, and he told me it was his house, his roof, and there was an access clause in my lease, and I could read it if I didn't believe him. I read it. There it was. So I did what a carpenter does. I didn't stack furniture against it like a scared kid, I built against him. I ran 3-inch screws through a scrap of hard maple and fixed a cleat across the door frame, the kind of brace you'd use to hang a loaded cabinet, and I set a second one low. I told myself no man his age was getting through decking screws sunk into the studs. What I did not let myself finish thinking was the obvious thing, that he wasn't coming in through the door at all. He owned the walls. He'd built half the additions himself. He knew ways into that house I hadn't found yet in a year of living in it. And I started finding proof I didn't want, and I found it the way only a man in my trade would. There's an access hatch in the ceiling of my bedroom closet, a framed panel up into the crawl space, and my first month there I caulked and painted the seam around it myself because it whistled in a hard wind. One morning the seam was broken. A clean hairline cracked the whole way around, the panel sitting 1/16 of an inch proud where I'd set it dead flush, and a dusting of pink insulation on the closet floor beneath it. He hadn't come through my door. He'd never needed to. He owned the walls, and he'd been lowering himself down out of the roof of my own bedroom closet on the nights I was off finishing somebody else's. And he'd left me his signature in the one language he knew I could read. I'd run that bead of caulk with my own 2 hands and tooled it flush, and he'd broken it and pressed it shut again like he thought I'd never read my own work. A finished man knows his own joint the way you know your own handwriting, and he'd been signing his name on my ceiling every time he came down. I went downstairs and banged on Cal's door and told him flat what I'd found, and the family act finally cracked down the middle. He didn't deny it. He went quiet, and then he went mean, and he told me a tenant who couldn't trust his own landlord was free to go find somewhere else to live, and that until I did, every square foot of that house was his, day or night, and I'd be smart to remember it. I went to a lawyer the next morning and paid $200 to hear that the access clause was real and enforceable, that this was a civil matter, that I could file and wait months for a hearing. I didn't have the months in me. I had 2 maple cleats screwed across a door he was never going to use and a bad feeling, and it turned out the bad feeling was the only thing in that apartment I'd read dead right. I woke up at 3 in the morning to a sound I couldn't place, and I lay there in the dark running it against everything I knew, the furnace, the ice on the gutters, the old house settling. It wasn't any of those. It was a sound I did know, though it took me a second, one out of my own trade, and it had no business happening at 3 in the morning. It was the soft grit of a panel being worked loose from its frame, and it was coming from inside my bedroom closet. The closet door was standing open a foot, the way I never leave it. And up in the black of it, high, the access hatch was open, a square of deeper dark in my own ceiling, and Cal was coming down out of it. Not looming anywhere near me, not yet, not even looking my way. He was too busy getting himself down, backing out of the roof of my bedroom 1 boot at a time, feeling for the closet shelf, then the other foot, a big man folding himself out of a hole he'd been using for months. And he went dead still with his whole weight on that shelf when the floor creaked under me. He didn't gasp. He didn't scramble. He looked at me over his shoulder, calm as a man on a ladder at noon, and he said the ice was backing up in the valley over my room and he'd gone up to check the roof deck before it came through the ceiling. At 3 in the morning. Coming down into my closet. In the dark. I did not go back to sleep. I got him down out of that closet and moving toward the stairs, and I'm not proud of how loud I was, and on the landing at the top of my own stairs he turned and swung, and I don't fully know if it was the flashlight in his hand or just his weight, but I went down the top 4 steps and put my wrist out to catch the rail and didn't catch it. Snapped it. They arrested him that night. And he was back in that house with the same ring of keys before my cast was dry, never once looking worried about it. Because a signed clause and a set of keys carry a man like that a great deal further than a pair of handcuffs ever will. My wrist aches when the lake effect comes in off Erie, every winter. But that's not the part that keeps me up. The house sold a while back, and the new owner seems fine, decent, and one of the first things he did, friendly as anything, was tell me not to worry, he keeps a master key for all the units in case of emergency. In case of emergency. I stood there in the stairwell and just nodded. Because I finally understood the thing I do this whole trade around and never once let myself say out loud. Every place I will ever rent, every door I will ever lock from the inside and bolt and brace with my own 2 hands and think I'm safe behind, there is a key that opens it, and it is not in my hand. It is in the hand of whoever owns the walls, and they are allowed to have it. And for the rest of my life, in every room I ever lock, I'll be doing the only math I know, which is that a door only locks against the people who don't already own the other side.